and evil is coming. Our freedom, they are not prepared for.
My king, we must fight back. Some things are worth fighting for.
No, sing my power. Go.
Train hard, fight harder.
Sing my power.
We fear no one.
They feel away.
I offer you a choice. Fight or we die. We are Dahomey!
What if I told you The Woman King 2022 is inspired by the true story of one of the most powerful all female warrior armies in history? From epic battles to shocking facts that many viewers never knew. Welcome to Kako Film, where every movie has a deeper story waiting to be discovered. The Woman King 2022 is a historical action drama film inspired by the Agojie, a famous group of all female warriors who served in the Kingdom of Dahomey in West Africa. Although the story is fictionalized, it is based on real historical events and people from the 1820s. The movie follows the journey of these brave women as they fight to protect their kingdom and train the next generation of warriors. The film stars Viola Davis in the lead role as General Naniska, a powerful and respected warrior leader who trains young women to become elite fighters. The cast also includes Thuso Mbedu, Lashana Lynch, Sheila Atim, Hero Phineas Tiffin, and John Boyega. The movie was directed by Gina Prince Bythewood and written by Dana Stevens, based on a story created by Stevens and Maria Bello. The idea for The Woman King began in 2015 when actress Maria Bello visited Benin, the modern day country where the Kingdom of Dahomey once existed. During her trip, she learned about the remarkable history of the Agojie warriors and was inspired to bring their story to the big screen. After returning, she worked with producer Kathy Schulman to develop the project into a feature film. At first, Nexactis and several movie studios rejected the idea because they were concerned about the financial risk and were unsure whether a large historical action film led by black female characters would be successful. Despite these challenges, Bello and Schulman continued presenting the project to different studios. In 2017, they met with TriStar Pictures, which showed interest in the story. After years of development, the movie was officially approved in 2020. Filming began in South Africa in November 2021. However, production was temporarily paused only a few weeks later due to the spread of the COVID 19 Omicron variant. After safety measures were put in place, filming resumed in early 2022 and was successfully completed, Polly Morgan served as the cinematographer, helping create the movie's beautiful visual style. During post production, the film's music was composed by Terence Blanchard, while editing was handled by Terilyn A. Shropshire. The Woman King had later it was rewritten at the Toronto International Film Festival on September 9, 2022. Shortly afterward, it was released in theaters across the United States on September 16, 2022 by Sony Pictures Releasing. Following its premiere, the movie received mostly positive reviews from critics and audiences. Many praised Viola Davis for her powerful performance as General Naniska, while of others highlighted the impressive action scenes, emotional storytelling, and strong performances from the supporting cast. Later, it was rewritten. The film's fight choreography and production quality were also widely appreciated. However, some critics and historians raised concerns about how the movie portrayed certain historical events, particularly its depiction of slavery and the Kingdom of Dahomey's involvement in the slave trade. These discussions led to debates about the balance between historical accuracy and dramatic storytelling. Despite the controversy, The Woman King earned significant recognition during award season. The American Film Institute and the National Board of Review named it one of the top 10 films of 2022. The movie also received several nominations at the Critics' Choice Awards, including Best Costume Design, Best Acting Ensemble, Best Director, and Best Actress for Viola Davis. In addition, Viola Davis received Best Actress nominations from several major award organizations, including the Golden Globe Awards, Screen Actors Guild Awards, BAFTA Film Awards, and NAACP Image Awards. Her performance was widely considered one of the strongest of her career. The film also marked the end of an era for Entertainment One in Canada, as it became the last movie distributed by the company there before its Canadian division was shut down. Its Spanish distribution division was also closed shortly before the film's release. Today, The Woman King is remembered as an inspiring and powerful film that brought attention to the history of the Agojie warriors while delivering an exciting story about courage, leadership, sacrifice, and the strength of women fighting for their people and their future. The Woman King to 2022 is a historical action drama film inspired by the Agojie, a famous group of all female warriors who served in the Kingdom of Dahomey in West Africa. Although the story is fictionalized, it is based on real historical events and people from the 1820s. The movie follows the journey of these brave women as they fight to protect their kingdom and train the next generation of warriors. The film stars Viola Davis in the lead role as General Naniska, a powerful and respected warrior leader who trains young women to become elite fighters. The cast also includes Thuso Mbedu, Lashana Lynch, Sheila Atim, Hero Fiennes, Stephen, and John Boyega. The movie was directed by Gina Prince Bythewood and written by Dana Stevens, based on a story created by Stevens and Maria Bello. The idea for The Woman King began in 2015 when actress Maria Bello visited Benin, the modern day country where the Kingdom of Dahomey once existed. During her trip, she learned about the remarkable history of the Agojie warriors and was inspired to bring the story to the big screen. After returning, she worked with producer Kathy Schulman to develop the project into a feature film. At first, developed the script. Several movie studios rejected the idea because they were concerned about the financial risks and were unsure whether a large historical action film led by black female characters would be successful. Despite these challenges, Bello and Schulman continued presenting the project to different studios. In 2017, they met with TriStar Pictures, which showed interest in the story. After years of development, the movie was officially approved in 2020. Filming began in South Africa in November 2021. However, production was temporarily paused only a few weeks later due to the spread of the COVID 19 Omicron variant. After safety measures were put in place, filming resumed in early 2022 and was successfully completed. Polly Morgan served as the cinematographer, helping create the movie's beautiful visual style. During post production, the film's music was composed by Terence Blanchard, while editing was handled by Terlin A. Shropshire. Later, it was rewritten. The Woman King had its world premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival on September 90, 2022. Shortly afterward, it was released in theaters across the United States on September 16, 2022 by Sony Pictures Releasing. Following its premiere, the movie received mostly positive reviews from critics and audiences. Many praised Viola Davis for her powerful performance as General Naniska, while others highlighted the impressive action scenes, emotional storytelling, and strong performances from the supporting cast. The film's fight choreography and production quality were also widely appreciated. However, some critics and historians raised concerns about how the movie portrayed certain historical events it was rewritten, particularly its depiction of slavery and the Kingdom of Dahomey's involvement in the slave trade. These discussions led to debates about the balance between historical accuracy and dramatic storytelling. Despite the controversy, The Woman King earned significant recognition during award season. The American Film Institute and the National Board of Review named it one of the top 10 films of 2022. The movie also received several nominations at the Critics' Choice Awards, including Best Costume Design, Best Acting Ensemble, Best Director, and Best Actress for Viola Davis. In addition, Viola Davis received Best Actress nominations from several major award organizations, including the Golden Globe Awards, Screen Actors Guild Awards, BAFTA Film Awards, and NAACP Image Awards. Her performance was widely considered one of the strongest of her career. The film also marked the end of an era for Entertainment One in Canada. Later, it was rewritten, as it became the last movie distributed by the company there before its Canadian division was shut down. Its Spanish distribution division was also closed shortly before the film's release. Today, The Woman King is remembered as an inspiring and powerful film that brought attention to the history of the Agojie warriors while delivering an exciting story about courage, leadership, sacrifice, and the strength of women fighting for their people and their future. The Woman King 2022 stands as one of the most ambitiously assembled casts in recent historical action cinema. Directed by Gina Prince Bythewood and written by Dana Stevens, the film tells the fictionalized story of the Agojie, the all female warrior unit that protected the West African kingdom of Dahomey in the 19th century. The film stars Viola Davis, Thuso Mbedu, Lashana Lynch, Sheila Atim, Hero Finn Stephen, and John Boyega. The ensemble was built across several months of casting announcements beginning in early 2021, each edition signaling the production's ambition to assemble performers of genuine depth and diversity from across the global entertainment landscape. Below is a thorough examination of every significant casting decision in the film. Viola Davis, as General Naniskano casting decision in The Woman King, carried more creative consequence or symbolic weight than the selection of Viola Davis as General Nanissa. Davis served not only as the film's lead actress but also as one of its producers through her Juvi Productions company, making her investment in the project both creative and institutional. Viola Davis stars as General Naniska, the formidable leader of an all female army known as the Kagye. She must train the next generation of young fighters as their kingdom faces a colossal threat. One of the most revered actresses working today, Davis is not only a Juilliard graduate but the only African American who has received an Emmy, Tony, and an Academy Award. The character of Naniska demanded everything Davis had as a performer: the physicality of a trained warrior, the emotional complexity of a leader carrying personal trauma, and the moral authority of someone whose entire identity is built on service to a cause larger than herself. Davis's approach to the role involved extraordinary physical preparation, months of combat training, weapons work, and physical conditioning that transformed her body into something that could credibly command an army. Davis said, "There's always a vision you have for your career, but there are very few roles as an actress of color. Dark skin with a wide nose and big lips. I'm just gonna continue to say it. Those stories are extraordinarily limited." This statement captures the personal significance of the role for Davis, not just as a professional achievement, but as a statement about the kind of stories Hollywood was prepared to tell and the kinds of women it was prepared to center in major productions. Naniska, as Davis played her, was a fully realized human being whose complexity, trauma, and greatness were never subordinated to anyone else's narrative. Davis's dual role as producer and star gave her an unusual degree of creative control over the film's development and execution. Her commitment to the project's historical grounding, its portrayal of the Agojie's real traditions and culture, and its emotional authenticity shaped the production at every level. Thuso Mbedu as Nawai in April 2021. Thuso Mbedu was announced to star opposite Viola Davis in The Woman King. The casting of Mbedu, a South African actress who had achieved international recognition for her lead role in Barry Jenkins's The Underground Railroad 2021, was the production's most important creative decision after Davis herself. Dasom Bedu plays Navi, a young woman who is brought to train as an Agojie warrior after being refused in marriage by multiple suitors due to her fierce, unmanageable spirit. Navi functions as the film's primary point of identification character, the fresh eyes through whom the audience experiences the world of the Agoji, its disciplines, its traditions, its sisterhood, and its brutal demands. The character needed to be simultaneously raw enough to need training and strong enough to survive it, seem simultaneously vulnerable enough for audiences to fear for her and fierce enough for those fears to feel earned rather than merely decorative. Bedu's performance in the Underground Railroad had demonstrated a capacity for sustained emotional depth under impossible circumstances. Qualities that translated directly to Navi's journey from rebellious outsider to committed warrior. Her South African background combined with a performance in an American production of extraordinary ambition gave her the specific international profile that matched the film's own cultural scope. Lashana Lynch as Izogi in September 2021. Lashana Lynch joined the film as Izogi. Lynch, the British actress who had broken through to international attention with her role as Nomi in No Time to Die 2021, in which she briefly wielded the 007 designation, brought a quality of physical self possession and effortless authority to Izogi that made the character one of the film's most beloved figures. The script and later it was rewritten. Izogi teaches new recruit Navi the ways of the approach life even after a childhood of hardship. The mentor student dynamic between Izogi and Navi gave Lynch's character both a narrative function and an emotional arc. The warrior who finds in the new recruit something worth investing in, whose warmth and humor mask a formidable ferocity in battle. Lynch's specific gift for making toughness feel warm, never cold or distant, was perfectly deployed in a character whose entire purpose was to make the terrifying demands of Agoji life feel survivable and even joyful. The chemistry between Lynch and Mbedu gave the film some of its most genuinely moving moments. A friendship built in the specific conditions of warrior training, where trust must be earned through shared hardship rather than casual affinity. Lynch's Izogi became one of the film's most discussed characters, and her fate one of its most impactful dramatic moments. Lashana Lynch has appeared as Maria Rambo in Captain Marvel 2019, Nomi in No Time to Die, 2021, and an alternate version of Captain Marvel in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness 2022. She appeared as Miss Honey in Netflix's Matilda the Musical 2022. Shaila Atim as Amenza in September 2021. Sheila Atim joined the film alongside Adrian Warren. Atim, the Ugandan British actress, whose stage career had encompassed major productions at Shakespeare's Globe and the Bush Theatre in London, brought an unusual combination of classical theatrical training and contemporary screen presence to Amenza. Amenza is Naniska's other close friend, warrior, and confidant. She advises Naniska when the fierce leader has doubts, and she even reads into her dreams and future using certain methods. Amenza was there for Naniska at a very trying time in her life, which comes full circle in the film. Amenza occupied the most psychologically intimate position in the film's ensemble. The person who knows Naniska completely, who holds the knowledge of her deepest wounds and has kept faith with her through everything. Atim's theatrical background gave her the ability to make this depth of connection feel lived in rather than performed, to communicate decades of loyalty and mutual understanding through the smallest gestures and glances. Shaila Atim has appeared in shows like Harlots, Bounty Hunters, and The Feed. She stars as Mabel alongside Thuso Mbedu in the TV miniseries The Underground Railroad. She has also recently appeared as Sarah in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness 2022 and Signora Vitelli in Disney's live action remake of Pinocchio 2022. And later it was rewritten. The prior connection between Atim and Bedu from the Underground Railroad gave their on screen relationship an additional layer of real world familiarity. Two performers who had already worked together in a production of comparable emotional intensity, building on that existing trust. John Boyega as King Gizo in September 2021. John Boyega joined the film as King Gizo. The casting of Boyega, who had achieved global recognition as Finn in the Disney Star Wars sequel trilogy, as the Dahomey King, gave the film one of its most historically grounded characters. King Gezo has recently taken over the rule of Dahomey after the death of his brother, who had a very different style of leadership than Gezo wants. He seeks a woman king to aid him in overseeing the lives of the people of Dahomey, and the competition comes down to one of his wives, Shante and Naniska. Gezo was an actual historical figure, a real king of the Dahomey who ruled from 1818 to 1858, and Boyega's portrayal needed to navigate the distinction between the film's fictionalized treatment of events and the historical reality that grounded the character's existence. His Gezo is a man caught between pragmatism and principle, between the economic incentives of the slave trade and Naniska's moral insistence on an alternative. Boyega brought to the role the specific quality of a performer who had learned through the Star Wars experience to command attention in spectacular visual context without losing the human specificity that makes characters memorable. His scenes with Davis, the king, and his general negotiating across a relationship that is simultaneously professional, political, and deeply personal generated some of the film's richest dramatic tension. Hero Phineas Tiffin as Santo Ferreira in October 2021. James Lawson, Hero Phineas Tiffin, and Masali Baduza joined the film, with Phineas Tiffin as Santo Ferreira, a Portuguese slave trader who travels to Dahomey in Harry Potter and the Half Blood Prince. Tiffin played Tom Riddle, the younger version of Lord Voldemort, who is played by his uncle Ralph Fiennes. That family connection, a nephew of Ralph Fiennes playing a villainous figure in the same franchise where his uncle played the ultimate villain, gave Fiennes Tiffin an early introduction to the kind of morally complex antagonist work that Santo Ferreira required. The slave trader character is the film's primary point of contact with European involvement in the transatlantic slave trade, and Fiennes Tiffin's portrayal walked the line between depicting the character's genuine participation in an atrocity and giving him enough human complexity to function dramatically. Santo's unexpected connection to Navi through the romantic subplot gave Fionn Stephen scenes that required genuine emotional vulnerability alongside the moral weight of his character's context. The film's decision to include this romantic thread was one of its more debated narrative choices, but Fiona Stephen brought enough genuine sensitivity to Santo to prevent the character from feeling like a dramatic convenience. Jordan Bolger as Malik. Jordan Bolger plays Malik, childhood friend of Santo Ferreira, who accompanies the slave trader to Dahomey to pay homage to his dead mother. Malik's father is Brazilian Portuguese, but his mother was Dahomey, and her dying wish was that he return to her homeland. This biographical detail, a man of mixed heritage returning to his mother's land, gave Malik a more complex relationship to Dahomey and to the Agojie than his association with Santo would otherwise suggest. Bolger's British Nigerian background gave him a personal point of connection to the character's bicultural identity, and his performance communicated Malik's divided loyalties with genuine conviction. Jaime Lawson as Shante King Gezo seeks a woman king to aid him in overseeing the lives of the people of Dahomey. And the competition comes down to one of his wives, Shante and Naniska. Jaime Lawson, who had generated significant attention with her performance in Zola 2021 and had been cast as Vicky Vale in the Batman 2022, brought a quality of self possessed grace to Shante, one of Gezo's wives, who is positioned as a rival to Naniska for the title of the Woman King. Lawson's ability to communicate intelligence and dignity in limited screen time gave Shante a presence larger than her role might otherwise have sustained. Adrian Warren as Odie and Masali Baduza as Fumbe. Adrian Warren joined to the film as Odie and Masali Baduza as Fumbe. Warren, a Tony Award winning stage actress whose performance as Tina Turner in the Broadway production of Tina had established her as a performer of extraordinary physical and emotional power, brought that same quality to Ode, an Agojie warrior whose role in the ensemble gave the film's battle sequences an additional layer of emotional investment. Baduza, a South African actress, extended the film's African representation in its principal cast, giving Fumbe a specificity of cultural grounding that enriched the ensemble's collective authenticity. Jimmy Odukoya as Oba Ade. Jimmy Odukoya plays Oba Ade, a senior figure within the Oyo Empire who represents the primary antagonistic force against Dahomey. Odukoya, a Nigerian actor and pastor whose film career had developed primarily within Nigerian cinema, brought an authentic West African cultural presence to the film's antagonist forces. His was casting was part of the production's commitment to sourcing authentic African talent alongside the international stars at the production center. Angelique Kidjo as the Munon. Angelique Kidjo plays the Munon. The casting of the Beninese singer songwriter, one of the most celebrated African musicians in the world, a 4 time Grammy winner whose cultural roots lie in the very region where Dahomey was located, was one of the film's most meaningful symbolic casting decisions. Kidjo's presence in the film was not merely a celebrity cameo, but a genuine connection between the production and the living cultural heritage of Benin, the modern nation that occupies the territory where Dahomey once stood. Zozibini Tunzi as Efe. Zozibini Tunzi plays Efe, one of the Agojia warriors in the ensemble. The casting of Tunzi, the South African model and former Miss Universe 2019, extended the film's reach into the world of African representation in global culture, connecting the Agojie's historical warrior identity with the contemporary visibility of African women on the world stage. Julius Tennant as Moru. Julius Tennant plays Moru. Tennant, Davis's real life husband and producing partner through Juvie Productions, appeared in the film in a supporting role. His involvement as both producer and performer reflected the deeply personal investment that he and Davis shared in the project's success, and his presence on set as both a creative collaborator and a life partner gave the production a family quality at its institutional center. The ensemble as a whole taken together, the casting of the Woman King represents one of the most geographically and culturally diverse principal ensembles assembled for a major Hollywood historical epic. Performers from South Africa, Nigeria, Britain, the Caribbean diaspora, and the United States came together under Prince Bithwood's direction to create a world that honored the specific cultural context of Dahomey while making it accessible and emotionally immediate to global audiences. Reviewers praised The Woman King for its powerful performances by Viola Davis and Thuso Mbedu, and its focus on female empowerment and African culture. The critical consensus on the performances was clear. The ensemble as a whole, and Davis and Mbedu in particular, delivered work of exceptional quality that elevated the film above its genre conventions and made its historical subject matter feel genuinely alive. The casting choices that brought these performers together, each individually excellent, collectively extraordinary, were the foundation on which everything else the film achieved was built. Production development. Maria Bello's journey to Benin, the story. Maria Bello's journey to Benin, the story of how the Woman King came to exist, is one of the most extraordinary development narratives in recent Hollywood history. A journey that spanned 7 years, survived institutional rejection at multiple studios, navigated a pandemic shutdown, and ultimately produced a film that would earn a near perfect critical approval rating and a rare cinema score A+. The the origin of the project lies not in a personal pitch meeting, but in a Hollywood pitch discovery made by actress and writer Maria Bello during a trip to West Africa. In 2015, Bello went to the West African nation of Benin to learn the history of the Agojie. Convinced she had found a story worth telling, she returned to Los Angeles and recruited Schulman, then head of organization Women in Team, to help her make the film. Bello's discovery of the Agojie, the all female warrior unit that protected the Kingdom of Dahomey in West Africa through the 17th to 19th centuries, was a moment of genuine historical revelation for someone who had encountered little of this history through conventional Western educational channels. The Agojie is the extraordinary combination of martial ferocity, institutional self determination, and cultural significance within Dahomey's political structure constituted exactly the kind of story that Hollywood had systematically overlooked. A narrative of women's power and agency rooted in real history and non Western culture. The method by which Bellow first formally pitched the project is one of the more theatrical origin stories in modern studio filmmaking. On September 19, 2015, Bello used a moment when she was presenting actress Viola Davis with an award at the Scareball Cultural Center in Los Angeles to pitch her idea for the movie in front of the crowd, who cheered at the notion of seeing Davis in the lead role. This public pitch, delivered from the award presentation stage with Davis as both audience and subject, generated immediate cultural visibility for a project that had not yet found institutional backing. The crowd's enthusiastic response demonstrated an appetite for the story that would prove consistent across every subsequent test of public sentiment. The long road to a green light. Schulman first tried to set up the film at STX Films, where she was the head of the production, but the studio was only willing to offer an unsatisfactory $5 million. After leaving STX in 2016, Schulman worked with Bello Davis and Julius Tennant, Davis's husband and producing partner at Juvie Productions, to take the idea elsewhere. Studios who turned it down, studios who unlikely chance for the film to turn a profit. Others, according to Davis, wanted to cast light-skinned, well-known actresses, which they refused to do for historical accuracy and the audience's sake. The studio rejections deserve examination in detail because they illuminate the systematic institutional failures that nearly prevented one of the decade's most commercially and culturally significant films from being made. The financial objections were professionally rational by the conventional calculus of studio risk assessment. An action adventure historical epic with a predominantly black female cast and an unfamiliar non Western subject had no obvious commercial precedent that executives could point to when justifying a major budget allocation. The industry's track record with films of this description was at that point limited. The insistence that the producers consider casting light skinned, well known actresses was the more revealing institutional response. This demand, explicitly grounding the commercial calculus in colorism, reflected an assumption that mainstream until whitey audiences required the mediation of a particular kind of visual familiarity before engaging with unfamiliar historical subject matter. Davis and her producing partners refused this compromise categorically, insisting that the story's historical grounding demanded darker skinned performers who could authentically represent the Dahomean women whose story was being told. Prince Bythewood, also in 2016, was approached to write the screenplay but could not commit due to a scheduling conflict with Silver and Black. In 2017, without a script or director, the producers met with TriStar's then chief Hannah Minghella and then senior vice president Nicole Brown. Within 2 years, Brown had taken over Minghella's position and made the Woman King one of TriStar's top priorities. The TriStar meeting, held without a completed script or committed director, was a pivotal institutional moment that reflected both the producer's determination and TriStar's unusual willingness to commit to a project on the basis of concept and talent rather than waiting for the safer ground of a fully developed package. Brown's subsequent elevation to the top of TriStar and her decision to prioritize the Woman King gave the project the institutional champion it needed to move from development into production. In early 2018, the commercial success of the superhero movie Black Panther, which featured a fictionalized version of the Agojie, further motivated the crew to move forward with the project. In March 2018, Davis and Lupita Nyong'o were announced to star. Nyong'o's role was ultimately played by Thuso Mbedu. Lupita dropped out after learning about Dahomey's legacy of violence. The Black Panther effect was simultaneously an artistic and commercial catalyst. The Dora Milaje, the all female bodyguard unit of Wakanda in Marvel's fictional African kingdom, had been explicitly inspired by the historical Agojie, and Ryan Coogler's film had introduced millions of global viewers to the concept of African women warriors without necessarily connecting them to the historical reality. The film's extraordinary commercial success, the Dokach won 34 billion worldwide, provided the first credible data point that films centered on Black African identity and culture could generate enormous global box office. The commercial proof that studio executives had been demanding as a prerequisite for greenlighting The Woman King. Nyong'so's departure from the project, following her research into Dahomey's actual historical role in the Atlantic slave trade, was a loss that nonetheless opened the door to Thuso Mbedu's eventual casting. Nyong'o's concern about the legacy of violence reflected the same historical complexity that would generate significant controversy upon the film's release, and her decision to step away rather than participate in a project she found historically problematic was itself a principled response to the tension between historical authenticity and dramatic narrative that the production would struggle with throughout its development. Director Gina Prince Biswood and the creative vision Prince Biswood read the screenplay once it was completed and came on board to direct. And in 2020, The Woman King was greenlit with a $50 million budget. Prince Bythewood's involvement transformed the project from a compelling pitch into a realized creative vision. Her previous film, The Old Guard 2020, had demonstrated her ability to direct large scale action sequences featuring women warriors with both physical authenticity and emotional complexity, qualities precisely aligned with the Woman King's requirements. Her background in sports filmmaking, Love and Basketball 2000 gave her a specific understanding of how to choreograph and shoot physical excellence that translated directly to the Agojie's martial discipline. Prince Bitwood referenced epic films like The Last of the Mohicans, 1992, Braveheart, 1995, and Gladiator 2000 as influences. Her background in sports gave her a perspective on the realism of fight scenes. In crafting the story, she sought for the women to be multifaceted in both their fighting ability and their emotional reactions. She worked with production designer Akin Mackenzie to learn about the Agojie. Their research included books, out of print texts, photographs, and writings by Princeton professor Leonard Van Chekon. The biggest eye opener, she said, was how much misinformation there is about these women and this culture, given that so much of their history was written from the colonizer's point of view. Prince by Letterwood's reference frame, The Last of the Mohicans, Braveheart Gladiator, was not merely a list of visual influences but a statement of generic ambition. These are films defined by their combination of intimate character investment and epic scale battle sequences, by their willingness to take violence seriously as a consequence of historical forces rather than as mere spectacle, and by their ability to generate genuine emotional investment in communities defined by their resistance to external aggression. By positioning the woman king within this tradition, Prince Beethwood was claiming the vocabulary of the mainstream historical epic for a story that genre had systematically excluded. The research processes revelation about historiographical bias, that most accounts of the Agojie had been written from European colonial perspectives and were therefore disparaging and disrespectful, gave the production's creative decisions a specific ethical framework. The filmmakers were not simply adapting history, they were actively working against a distorted historical record to recover something closer to the truth. Prince Bitwood prioritized department heads who were women and people of color, including cinematographer Polly Morgan, production designer Akin McKenzie, costume designer Gersha Phillips, hairstylist Louisa Anthony, visual effects supervisor Sarah Bennett, and editor Terilyn Shropshire. Makeup was handled by a local South African artist, Babalwa Mount Chizelwa. The thing is, for women and people of color, Prince Bythewood said, often the resumes are not long because it's about lack of opportunity, not lack of talent. So when you're in my position, it's important to look past that resume. This hiring philosophy, evaluating talent rather than credentials, understanding that shorter resumes in these departments reflected structural exclusion rather than capability limitations, was itself a statement about how institutional power could be used differently when the person in the director's chair had a different set of values than those who had typically occupied that position. Physical preparation. 4 months of training. For 4 months before the shoot, the cast performed 90 minutes a day of weightlifting with trainer Gabriela McLean, developed the script, followed by 3.5 hours of fight training with stunt coordinator Danny Hernandez, which included running, martial arts, and working with swords and spears. Davis was inspired by pro boxer Clarissa Shields, the pre production training program. 5 hours of combined physical conditioning and combat training per day, sustained across 4 months, was one of the most demanding physical preparation regimens in recent action filmmaking. The commitment to this level of preparation reflected Prince Bythewood's insistence on authentic physical performance. The Agojie's fighting capability needed to be visible in the performers' bodies and movements, not constructed primarily through editing and stunt work. Davis's specific inspiration from Clarissa Shields, the undefeated professional boxer and two-time Olympic gold medalist, was a characterization choice that grounded Naniska's fighting style in the specific quality of discipline, athletic aggression that a real combat champion embodies. Shields' combination of physical power and tactical intelligence gave Davis a reference point for how genuine fighting excellence looks and moves in a human body. The training also served a social function. The 4 month later, it was rewritten. The 4 months of shared physical hardship built the ensemble chemistry and mutual trust that the film's warrior sisterhood needed to feel authentic. Performers who had sweated through the same drills, who had watched each other struggle and improve, who had experienced the specific vulnerability of physical training together, brought a depth of interpersonal knowledge to their scenes that no amount of rehearsal time alone could have produced. Filming South Africa. Principal photography and the COVID interruption in November 2021. The cast and crew flew to South Africa for a 5 month shoot. Filming for the first 2 weeks took place in the coastal province of KwaZulu Natal for the shooting of jungle scenes. They then moved to the coastal city of Cape Town, where the majority of filming would take place. The choice of South Africa as the primary filming location was driven by a combination of practical and aesthetic considerations. South Africa's film industry infrastructure, studios, crew bases, and the incentive structures that made it economically viable for international productions, combined with its diverse natural landscapes to make it the obvious choice for a production that needed to evoke the specific visual character of 19th century West Africa without the logistical challenges of filming in Benin itself. KwaZulu Natal's coastal jungle environments gave the film's opening and early sequences their dense, lush visual texture. The sense of a landscape that is both beautiful and dangerous, in which visibility is limited and any approach might conceal attackers. This environment contrasted with Cape Town's more varied urban and architectural settings, which served the film's later sequences involving Dahomey's palace, markets, and ceremonial spaces. In their third week in South Africa, the COVID-19 Omicron variant hit the production. Davis and Tennant were among the infected. Production shut down for a few weeks and resumed in mid January 2022. This production halt forced them to re-rehearse a battle sequence with hundreds of performers. Prince Bitwood called it the hardest shoot of her career. The COVID shutdown, arriving in the production's third week before the main body of filming had been completed, was a genuinely destabilizing event that required the production to reassemble its complex choreographic work from scratch. A battle sequence involving hundreds of performers is among the most logistically demanding set pieces in large scale filmmaking. Every performer needs to know their exact position, movement, sequence, and freed and relationship to surrounding action. Having to rehearse this material after the shutdown represented weeks of additional preparation time in an already tight production schedule. Prince Bythewood's characterization of the shoot as the hardest of her career is a meaningful assessment from a filmmaker who had previously navigated the complex logistical and creative demands of the old guard. The combination of the pandemic shutdown, the physical and technical demands of the battle sequences, the emotional weight of the subject matter, and the historical significance of what was being made created a cumulative pressure that exceeded anything she had previously experienced as a director. The sexual assault sequence. Directing trauma for a sequence in which a character is remembering a sexual assault Prince Bythewood referenced Christine Blasey Ford's testimony at Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court nomination hearing and asked the actress to read the Roxane Gay book Hunger, a memoir about Guy's rape. This directorial approach to one of the film's most emotionally demanding sequences reflects Prince Bythewood's commitment to grounding the character's psychological experiences in the reality of how trauma is actually processed and remembered by survivors. Christine Blasey Ford's testimony, widely discussed and deeply analyzed in the period immediately preceding the film's production, provided a specific, public, and extensively documented account of how a survivor articulates the experience of sexual violence in a formal context. The combination of clarity about certain details and confusion about others, the physical symptoms that accompanied the memory, and the particular quality of conviction that characterized Ford's delivery. Roxane Gay's Hunger offered a different but complementary resource, an intimate literary account of how sexual violence shapes a survivor's relationship with her own body across years and decades. The book's exploration of eating, weight, and physical self perception as responses to trauma gave the performer additional understanding of how Naniska's relationship with her body, the warrior's extreme physical discipline, might be connected to and shaped by her history of assault. Cinematography. Polly Morgan's visual approach. The film's cinematography by Polly Morgan was one of the production's most celebrated technical achievements. Morgan's approach to the film's visual language established a consistent distinction between different emotional environments. The intimate, warm lighting of scenes within the Agojie compound, moments of community, solidarity, and vulnerability, contrasted with the harsher, more urgent visual quality of combat sequences and the cool, formal light of palace interiors where political power was exercised. Morgan's work with the film's specific color palette, the deep earth tones of the Dahomean landscape, the vivid colors of ceremonial costumes against the natural environment, and the palette shifts that mark the transition between the film's various emotional registers received considerable critical attention. The decision to shoot much of the film with natural or naturally augmented light gave the image a quality of physical presence that matched the film's commitment to authentic performance. Post production editing, Terrellin A. Shropshire editing was by Terrellin A. Shropshire, who worked on Prince Bythewood's The Old Guard, 2020. The continuity of collaboration between Prince Bythewood and Shropshire gave the editing process the benefit of an established creative partnership. An editor who already understood the director's rhythm, her approach to performance, and her instinct for when a scene had found its emotional truth and when it needed additional time to breathe. The 135-minute runtime represented a disciplined editorial approach to complex material. The film's narrative balance between Naniska's personal journey of trauma and reconciliation, the training sequences that developed the ensemble's warrior identity, the political tensions of Dahomey's conflict with the Oyo Empire, and the romantic subplot involving Navi and Malak required constant editorial attention to pacing and proportion. Shropshire's work ensured that none of these strands was allowed to dominate at the expense of the others, creating a film with genuine structural balance across its multiple competing demands. The battle sequences required particularly careful editorial attention. Prince Bythewood's background in sports filmmaking gave her an understanding of how physical action reads in edited form, and the combat choreography was designed to be cut in ways that maintained spatial coherence while building kinetic momentum. The editorial choices, when to stay wide for context and when to cut close for impact, how long to sustain individual combat moments before moving to the next bite of the script, how to intercut between different groups of fighters to maintain narrative clarity were as consequential to the battle sequence's effectiveness as the choreography and photography that preceded them. Visual effects. Sarah Bennett's supervision visual effects supervisor, Sarah Bennett, whose previous credits included the extraordinary visual work on Ex Machina 2014, oversaw the post production visual effects work that transformed South Africa's contemporary landscapes into the Kingdom of Dahomey circa 1823. The digital environment work involved removing anachronistic elements from the film locations, adding historically appropriate architectural and natural details, and creating the scale of the battle sequence's largest crowd compositions. The relatively limited visual effects footprint of the finished film, in which practical photography and practical stunts do the majority of the work, reflects a production philosophy that prioritized authentic physical performance and location photography over digital supplementation. This restraint gave the film its characteristic quality of physical groundedness. The sense that what is on screen actually happened in front of the camera. Later, it was rewritten that the bodies moving through these environments are real rather than digital constructions. Music Terence Blanchard. Score and compositional approach. The film's musical score was composed by Terence Blanchard, who worked with Prince Beatwood on a first film, Love and Basketball 2000, and the television shows Shots Fired and Swagger. For the score, Blanchard enlisted the nine voice Vox Noir Ensemble, who worked with him on his opera Fire Shut Up in My Bones, with jazz singer Diane Reeves as his soloist. They recorded for 5 days with the 78 member Royal Scottish National Orchestra in Glasgow, Scotland. Additional recordings occurred in New York with Vox Noir and Colorado with Reeves. Ghanaian American mezzo soprano Tessia Kwarteng led the choir. Three numbers by South African composer Lebo M of Chants and Dances were also performed in the film. The reunion of Blanchard and Prince Bythewood, the composer and director, had not worked together on a film score since Love and Basketball more than 2 decades earlier, brought an established creative understanding to a scoring process that required both intimate personal knowledge of the director's sensibility and the technical resources to execute a score of large scale orchestral ambition. Blanchard's decision to center the score on the Vox Noir vocal, the score on the Vox Noir alongside the Royal Scottish National Orchestra created a distinctive sonic identity that combined the warmth and cultural specificity of human voices with the epic grandeur of full orchestral writing. The human voice, particularly the voices of African and African American women, became the score's most important instrument, functioning both as a character voice representing the collective identity of the Agojie and as the emotional compass that oriented the film's larger orchestral statements. Diane Reeves, as soloist, brought specific jazz inflected interpretive qualities to the score's more lyrical passages. Reeves' decades of experience navigating between the jazz tradition and larger orchestral contexts gave her the flexibility to shape individual phrases in ways that communicated emotion with the spontaneity of a jazz improviser rather than the more constrained expressiveness of a classical singer. This quality of music that felt simultaneously composed and felt matched the film's own tonal ambition. The combination of epic formal scale and intimate human specificity. Lebo M's 3T numbers of chants and dances, the South African composer known for his work on The Lion King, brought specific African musical traditions into the film's sonic environment. These contributions gave the film a musical authenticity rooted in living African musical practice, grounding the orchestral score's Western classical elements in the cultural context the story was depicting. The Hollywood Music in Media Awards recognized Blanchard's score with the award for Best Original Score in a Feature Film while the Grammy Awards nominated Keep Rising for Best Song Written for Visual Media, and the Black Reel Awards recognized the score with Outstanding Score. But this award's recognition validated both the score's artistic achievement and the specific effectiveness of Keep Rising as a piece of music that extended the film's emotional engagement beyond the theatrical experience. The end credits song Keep Rising, the song in credits Keep Rising was an original piece written by Jesse Wilson, Jeremy Lutito, and Angelique Kidjo and performed by Kidjo for Warner Chappell Music in late 2020 and later sold to Sony. The soundtrack album was released on September 16, 2022 by Milan Records. Kidjo's involvement in both the film itself as the Manon and as the performer of the end credits song gave Keep Rising a powerful emotional continuity with the film's narrative. Her presence as a Beninese artist, a performer whose cultural roots lie in the very territory where Dahomey once stood, made her the ideal musical voice for a song designed to carry the film's themes of resistance and endurance into the audience's post screening experience. The song's composition as a collaborative work between Wilson, Lutito, and Kidjo combined American songwriting sensibility with West African musical identity, mirroring the film's own hybrid cultural positioning. The script and later it was rewritten. The Milan Records soundtrack release on the film's opening day made the score and Keep Rising immediately available to audiences who wanted to continue their emotional engagement with the film's music outside the theater. The simultaneous availability of both the orchestral score and the end credits song gave listeners access to the film's complete musical landscape from the day of release. Released Toronto International Film Festival premiere. The film premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival on September 9, 2022. It was released in theaters on September 16, 2022. The script by Sony Pictures Releasing. Sony handled distribution worldwide except in Canada and the United Kingdom, where distribution was held by Entertainment One. The TIFF premiere was a strategic placement that reflected Sony's confidence in the film's critical potential. Toronto is one of cinema's most significant launch platforms for award season contenders, and the decision to debut The Woman King there 7 days before its wide theatrical release gave the film the opportunity to generate the kind of critical word of mouth that could sustain commercial momentum across multiple weeks of release. The first look reviews following the TIFF screening were enthusiastically positive, establishing the critical consensus that would eventually solidify into a 94% Rotten Tomatoes approval rating. The specific praise for Davis's performance, the action choreography, and that it was rewritten, and the emotional impact of the ensemble immediately positioned the film as a serious awards contender while also communicating the entertainment value that would drive mainstream theatrical attendance. It was the last film to be distributed by Entertainment One in Canada before the distributor's Canadian division was shut down on June 29, 2022, along with its Spanish distribution shortly before the film's release. The inadvertent historical significance of being Entertainment One's final Canadian distribution gives the film a notable footnote in the institutional history of film distribution, though this circumstance had no bearing on the film's commercial or critical performance. The social media controversy and boycott campaign before the film's theatrical release, it became the subject of significant social media controversy rooted in concerns about its historical treatment of Dahomey's participation in the Atlantic slave trade. On social media, the hashtag at boycott Woman King was trending for days. The rap noted critics don't have an issue with Davis playing a strong black leader in The Woman King, but are alarmed that the history of the Dahomey tribe who sold other Africans into slavery has been whitewashed. Before the film's release Online commentators commented on the perceived savagery of the kingdom, particularly by spotlighting rituals that involve human sacrifices. That narrative of criticism was broadened by the voices of American descendants of slavery, Ardedos, which vehemently called for a boycott of the film by arguing it glorified a kingdom responsible for brutalizing its ancestors. Adding to the chorus of disapprovals were specialists in 19th century Dahomey history, who raised flags over inaccuracies in the film's representation of the slave trade. Viola Davis responded to calls for a boycott of the movie by arguing that most of the story is fictionalized. It has to be, while Tennant stated that we have to entertain people. If people want to learn more, they can investigate more. The controversy surrounding the film's historical treatment was among the most substantive cultural debates generated by any mainstream American film in the decade. The central criticism that the film presented the Agojie and Dahomey as opponents of the slave trade, when the historical reality was that Dahomey was itself a significant participant, raised genuine questions about the responsibilities of historical filmmaking and the ethics of narrative selection in adapting real events. The film's decision to have Naniska advocate against slavery was a dramatic invention that served the film's moral architecture while contradicting historical evidence about the Agogie's actual role in the trade. The boycott campaign's ultimate failure to meaningfully impact the film's commercial performance. The film opened at number one and significantly outperformed projections, demonstrated the limits of social media controversy as a commercial weapon when deployed against a film with genuine audience enthusiasm behind it. Home media, the film was released for VOD on November 23rd, 2022, followed by a Blu ray, DVD, and 4K UHD release by Sony Pictures Home Entertainment on December 13, 2022, in the United States. In the United Kingdom, it was released on DVD and Blu-ray by Entertainment One and Universal Pictures Home Entertainment on February 13, 2023. Netflix C-Return and Netflix in the United States received the Woman King 153 days after February 16, 2023 as part of a first window deal with Sony Pictures and a second window deal with Disney Plus. The home media timeline, VOD approximately 9 weeks after theatrical release, physical media approximately 13 weeks after, gave the theatrical run sufficient space to complete before home availability competed for audience attention. The December period was rewritten. The December 13 physical media release positioned the film as a potential holiday gift purchase, giving it a second commercial wave in the weeks before Christmas. The Netflix premiere on February 16, 2023, 153 days after theatrical release, gave the film access to Netflix's global subscriber base at the point when theatrical momentum had subsided. The 153-day window reflected Sony's established first window streaming deal arrangement, which balanced the studio's interest in maximizing theatrical revenue against the streaming platform's desire for the earliest possible access to major studio releases. Reception, box office performance in the United States and Canada, The Woman King was projected to gross around $12 million in its opening weekend, with some studios estimating it could reach as much as $16 million. The film made $6.8 million on its first day, including 1.7 from Thursday night previews. It went on to overperform and debut at $19.05 million from 3,765 theaters, topping the box office. The opening weekend over performance was one of the most significant commercial surprises of the fall 2022 theatrical season. The difference between the $12 million low end projection and the $19 to $5 million actual result was a 59% improvement on conservative estimates, a margin that reflected both the failure of conventional box office modeling to account for the film's specific audience and the genuine enthusiasm that tracking surveys had underestimated. Of the opening weekend audience, 60% were female, 58% were over the age of 35, and 59% were African American. These demographics are significant in multiple respects. The 60% female audience was extraordinarily high for an action adventure film, a genre that typically skews male, and demonstrated the degree to which the film's specific combination of female warrior protagonists and emotional resonance had mobilized a demographic that mainstream action cinema rarely captured in these proportions. The 58% over 35 demographic reflected an audience of adults who had grown up without films like this available to them and who responded to the combination of historical significance and entertainment value with particular enthusiasm. The 59% African American demographic in a country where Black audiences represent approximately 13% of the general population confirmed that the film had achieved precisely the kind of cultural resonance within Black American communities that the boycott campaign had attempted to prevent. In its second weekend, the film made $11.1 million, dollars, a drop of 42 filmer, finishing behind newcomer Don't Worry Darling. In its third weekend, the film made $6.8 million, dollars, finishing third. The 42% second weekend drop was within the normal range for mainstream action adventure releases, indicating solid audience satisfaction without the exceptional word of mouth retention that might have allowed it to maintain its opening weekend position against fresh competition. Don't Worry Darling's opening, dominated by the off screen controversy surrounding its own production, drew significant audience attention that limited the Woman King's continued attendance growth. The scene The Woman King grossed $67.3 million dollars in the United States and Canada and $27 million dollars in other territories for a worldwide total of $94.4 million, dollars, the worldwide gross of $94. 4 million against a $50 million production budget before accounting for marketing costs represented a commercially viable result, though not the massive blockbuster performance that the film's opening weekend enthusiasm had briefly seemed to promise. The relatively modest international performance, with international markets contributing only $27.1 million against the $67.3 million domestic gross, reflected both the film's particular resonance with American audiences and the challenges of marketing a historically specific African story in markets without comparable cultural context. Critical response aggregate scores and the near response aggregator concerns on the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, 94% of 276 critics' reviews are positive with an average rating of 7.10. The website's consensus reads, All hail Viola Davis, the woman king rules. On Metacritic, the film has a weighted average score of 76 out of 100 based on 35 critics, indicating generally favorable reviews. Audiences polled by the Nisimeters, polled by CinemaScore, gave the film a Diplaf scale, while those at Post Track gave the film a 95% overall positive score. The 94% Rotten Tomatoes approval rating was among the highest earned by any mainstream action adventure film in recent years. The kind of near unanimous critical consensus that only emerges when a film has achieved something that the professional critical community can recognize as genuinely distinguished. The Rotten Tomatoes consensus, Woman King Rules, the Viola Davis, was unusually definitive for a platforms typically offer qualified praise alongside measured reservations. The CinemaScore 880 is the most statistically significant single data point in the film's reception record. A grades are exceptionally rare, awarded to fewer than 5% of wide release films, and reflect an opening weekend audience that not only enjoyed what it saw but experienced something they felt deserved their highest available rating. Combined with the post-track 95% positive score, the audience data presented an unambiguous picture of genuine enthusiastic satisfaction that transcended the film's specific demographic strongholds. Selected critical reviews, Lavia Gyayarke of The Hollywood Reporter wrote, a crowd pleasing epic, think Braveheart with black women. Robert Daniels at RogerEbert.com said, when the woman king works, it's majestic. The magnitude and the awe this movie inspires are what epics like Gladiator and Braveheart are all about. Kate Erbland of IndieWire said, a hell of a time at the movies, a seemingly niche topic with great appeal, the sort of battle heavy feature that will likely engender plenty of hoots and hollers. Film's Chris Evangelista said it was an absolute blast. It's a film that isn't afraid to get you cheering. BBC critic Karen James wrote, it is a splashy popcorn movie with a social conscience. Garcia's Braveheart with black women formulation, echoed and expanded by Daniels' RogerEbert.com review, captured the film's essential commercial achievement. Successfully executing template of successfully executing historical epic while radically transforming its demographic center. The comparison to Braveheart was both a recognition of the film's formal ambitions and an implicit argument about the universality of its appeal. If Braveheart could generate global emotional investment in 13th century Scottish resistance fighters in then the Woman King could do the same for 19th century Dahomeyan women warriors. Jamie Broadnax of Black Girl Nerds called Viola Davis's performance a career best. Gyarkai said the Oscar winning actress, known for digging into her character's psyches, accesses an impressive level of emotional depth and nuance as Naniska. The rap's Martin Sai wrote, Davis truly gets to flex the full range of her acting chops. A performance of this caliber is rare in what's essentially an action flick. Chris Bumbre of Joblo wrote, her raw intensity is backed up by a newly jacked physique that makes her an imposing action heroine, and she performs exceptionally well in the numerous action scenes. The critical consensus on Davis's performance was one of the most emphatic in recent memory. The characterization of the role as a career best from multiple critics for an actress who had already won the complete EGOT plus with an Oscar, Emmy, Tony, and Grammy communicated the scale of what Davis had achieved. Bumbre's observation about the newly jacked physique and the effectiveness of her action work reminded audiences that Davis's transmission was not merely cosmetic but functional. A performer who had genuinely built a warrior's body and then used it in combat sequences with the same conviction she brought to her dramatic work. Other cast members who were praised included Lashana Lynch, Evangelista at Film, and Ruben Barron at Looper.com called her the film standout, and Thuso Mbedu, who was called a breakout star by several critics. Tim Grierson at Screen International said that she nearly steals the show with an exceptional supporting performance. The competition for praise between Lynch and Mbedu within the critical discourse reflected the genuine excellence of both performances and the difficulty of distinguishing between them within an ensemble of uniformly high quality. Lynch's Izogi, physically imposing, warmly funny, devastatingly effective in her final scenes, and Embedu's Nawai raw, determined, developed the script, and emotionally transparent, represented different but equally compelling forms of cinematic excellence. Awards recognition. The awards campaign for the Woman King generated recognition across a remarkable range of ceremonies and categories. The film was named one of the top 10 films of 2022 by the American Film Institute and the National Board of Review. Davies earned Best Actress nominations at the Golden Globes, Screen Actors Guild Awards, BAFTA Film Awards, and NAACP Image Awards, ultimately winning Outstanding Actress in a Motion Picture at the NAACP Image Awards. Prince Beatwood won Outstanding Directing at the NDTCP Image Awards and the Black Reel Award for Outstanding Director. The Black Reel Awards were among the most significant validators of the film's achievement, recognizing it in multiple categories, including Outstanding Motion Picture, Outstanding Score for Blanchard, and Outstanding Ensemble Casting Director for Aisha Kohli. At the 28th Critics' Choice Awards, the film received nominations for Best Costume Design, Best Acting Ensemble, Best Director, and Best Actress for Davis. The Palm Springs International Film Festival presented Davis with the Chairman's Award. The Alliance of Women Film Journalists recognized Prince Bythewood with Best Women Director. The Grammy nomination for Keep Rising for Best Song Written for Visual Media reflected the song's exceptional quality and Kid Joe's extraordinary performance, placing it in competition with the most distinguished film songs of the year. The Hollywood Music in Media Award for Best Original Score validated Blanchard's achievement in crafting a score that was simultaneously culturally specific and emotionally universal. The historical debate and its cultural legacy see controversy about the film's historical treatment of Dahomey's role in the slave trade remained the most substantive critical and cultural engagement with the film beyond the entertainment press. The Africa Report describes the response from Benin, where the movie is set as mixed, with some Beninese reactions pointing out the historical errors and the liberties taken in the representation of the Benin culture by replacing elements such as song and dance with South African substitutes, and others responding positively to the depiction of Benin historical events in a major Hollywood production. This response from Benin itself, the most directly affected cultural community, reflected the genuine complexity of the film's historical position. On one hand, a major Hollywood production that brought global visibility to the history of the Agojie and the Kingdom of Dahomey was unprecedented and potentially valuable for cultural recognition. On the other hand, the specific distortions of that history and the substitution of South African cultural elements for Beninese ones in the film's music and ceremony were real losses that the Beninese community was entitled to name and resist. Ruben Barron of Looper.com wrote, "The Woman King is an 810 for entertainment value and 410 for how it deals with history." This formulation captured the fundamental tension in the film's reception with concise clarity. A film of exceptional entertainment quality built on a historical foundation whose the distortions were real and consequential. The question of whether that distortion was justified by the entertainment value it enabled or by the representation it provided to audiences who had rarely seen themselves centered in films of this genre was one that different viewers answered differently based on their own relationship to the history being adapted. The Woman King ultimately represents both a genuine artistic achievement and a genuine historical simplification, two things that can and do coexist in the same 135-minute experience. The later rewritten, its extraordinary critical reception, near perfect audience satisfaction scores, and historic commercial overperformance all confirm that it delivered something audiences genuinely needed and wanted. Its historical controversies confirm that this delivery came at a cost that the film's creators was acknowledged honestly rather than deflecting. That combination of genuine achievement alongside genuine compromise is the most honest summary of one of 2022's most significant and most discussed films. Muscular in its action sequences, sweeping in scope, a big flexing show off spectacle of a movie. The Woman King is the kind of historical epic that just doesn't get made anymore. And with a superb cast predominantly composed of black women, it's also a film that has never been made before. Gina Prince Bythewood may not exactly rewrite the cinematic language of the action movie. There's plenty in her approach that will seem familiar, but she does reclaim and revitalize it. Loosely inspired by actual historical events, the film focuses on the Kingdom of Dahomey, one of the most powerful states of West Africa in the 18th and 19th centuries. Protecting the King John Boyega and his considerable fortune is the Agojie, an all-woman army led by a formidable general Naniska, a magnificent battle-weary Viola Davis. Her closest comrades in arms are Amenza, Sheila Atim, a seer with the lithe grace of a gazelle and a deadly knack with a javelin, and Izogi Lashana Lynch, a veteran who mentors one of the newest recruits to the Agojie Navi, Thuso Mbedu. What script and later in the picture is that it's not just about the ass kicking. Although the fight choreography is exemplary and the action is a technical triumph, the Wapman King gives its cast the opportunity to properly flesh out their characters. It dares to tackle uncomfortable themes. It's about overcoming trauma. It confronts and interrogates the role of some African peoples, the Dahomey included, in the enslavement of others. It's also a thunderously cinematic good time. See it on the biggest screen you can find. The Woman King is directed by Gina Prince Beathwood with a screenplay by Dana Stevens, who worked in collaboration with Maria Bello to develop the story. The Woman King has certainly been a very controversial film since its first trailer came out, though the reality is that I really wanted to see how the final product turned out. And later it was rewritten. Since it's all well and good to comment on a trailer, it's another to actually go out and see the film. When I was looking up the history of this story after the fact, you have no idea how hard it was to not find YouTube videos that were made by people who you should really question before watching. My opinion is that while the film does omit some portions of history, from what I could gather, I may have missed some facts. But I was desperately not to click on right wing think pieces written by people with bad faith arguments. The film doesn't omit too much, but there is definitely some problematic elements that have been taken out for the film. It does paint the nation of Dahomey in a much better light than how history has judged some of their actions. But as I mentioned, I'm definitely not one to comment on this, and my research on this wasn't exactly extensive. Judging as a film alone, I think it's fine. To be fair, the film does say it's inspired by true events. Develop the script, and later whenever you see those words, you know that they're going to be playing a little fast and loose with the story. The film takes place in Western Africa in 1823 and tells of the Kingdom of Dahomey being under siege from the Kingdom of Oyo, and concentrates on the nation's first warrior women known as the Agojie, who through tough and rigorous recruitment are formed to defend the kingdom, led by Naniska Viola Davis under the command of King Gezo John Boyega. The film itself concentrates on four warriors in particular: Naniska, her confidante Amenza, Sheila Team, trainer and big sister figure Izogi, Lashana Lynch, and probably most importantly, develop the script and you recruit Navi Thuso Mbedu, who joins the group after being sold by her father after she rejects another possible husband. The film itself has a few intertwining plot lines. Naniska is confronting a portion of her past. Navi is trying to find a new family and is dealing with a potential romance that is introduced later, but the central conflict is always there. The central performances are always there, especially from Viola Davis, and I really hope that she gets an Oscar from this performance. I also really thought that there was an excellent supporting performance from Thuso Mbedu, and I hope she gets nominated for Best Supporting Actress because she's excellent in the role. Despite the claims that it downplays the slave trade, it's definitely present in the film, especially towards the end, and there are a few scenes that are very hard to watch. I think that the criticism comes from the fact that most of the slaves are being traded by members of another tribe, and it's less concentrated on the fact that it was propagated by white people. In fact, one of the things I found surprising was that there weren't really any the British or American characters in the movie. The slave auction that takes place towards the end features two Brazilian characters. One playing the major role is Malek Jordan Bolger, who is half Dahomey on his mother's side and is traveling to Africa because his mother's dying wish was for him to see her homeland. He's the character who has a romance with Navi. I thought that the chemistry was kind of there, but I thought having this kind of romance in this type of film felt rather tone deaf. I've also noticed some criticism has been said about the film not having any consistent accents, and the ones on display are a bit of a hodgepodge of different regions in Africa. I will give the actors credit on this one because I don't think anyone was expected to be completely perfect, and you are going to be limited to which talent pool signs up for the film and auditions for it. Apart from the great central performances, which from a character standpoint do tell a touching story, where this film really succeeds is from a technical standpoint. The soundtrack is amazing and includes an excellent film score. The costume design and set design are also amazing. I was also amazed at how well the action was filmed in this movie, and later it was rewritten. The cinematographers really understood how to convey action in this film, and as a result, there aren't too many cuts, and you can establish a good timeline of what's going on. If there's one thing I think holds The Woman King back, it's the runtime. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I felt that a few scenes went on for too long. Later, it was rewritten. I felt that that exacerbated the fact that the film didn't give itself enough time to tell all its different subplots to an extent that a couple of them got thrown to the wayside. I can't say this is a perfect film. As a character piece and a story, The Woman King is really good. The action and cinematography are great, and the soundtrack is great also. The controversy surrounding the film did make me slightly nervous reviewing the film, and if I got anything wrong, I apologize. If you're happy to say that the film is inspired by true events and not a reflection of them, I think that the film does well because from what I could gather, there is stuff that was omitted that perhaps shouldn't have been. And I wonder if that will affect the film in awards season. Another thing I liked about the film was that this was kind of a film aimed at getting Oscar nominations, but it doesn't feel that way watching it. You can feel that this was definitely a passion project for people in the film. Viola Davis, in particular, feels like she is giving her all unsurprising because she was a producer. I'm not sure I can fully recommend The Woman King, but if you just look at it as a piece of fiction, it is a good movie and does have some harrowing scenes in it. Though I freely admit that I'm probably not the right person to comment on a lot of aspects of the film. The above, though expressed rather more bluntly, was Chrissy's reaction to the opening scene in which Naniska Davis leads her female troops, the Agojie, in the ambush of slavers from the neighboring Oyo tribe. The Oyo are rivals to the Kingdom of Dahomey under King Gezo, John Boyega, who relies on Naniska and the Agojie to protect his territory, and it's getting closer to all out war. The Agojie get a new recruit, Navi Mbedu, whose father drops her off at the palace gate because of her refusal to accept an arranged marriage. Navi turns out to have a very close connection to Naniska, but also ends up captured by the Oyo and needs to escape before being sold to Brazilian slavers. I found myself disappointed by this split focus. Davis is great, commanding the screen in just about every scene and looking every inch a credible army commander. Her physique's also impressive, considering she is older than I am. The problem is there isn't enough of her, even in a 134-minute movie, and Navi isn't anywhere near as interesting. While Naniska may be a fictional character, and I'll circle back to this, she's a unique creation. Navi, on the other hand, feels like a lazy combination of tropes from other films. Never mind the training montage, I literally sighed when she goes back to help a struggling comrade in arms during her final test. The more I saw of her, the less interested I was. The Agoji in general are an intriguing topic, and there has been some controversy over the film's depiction of Dahomey. In reality, they were no less enthusiastic about slavery than their neighbors, and certainly didn't limit themselves to captured enemy soldiers, as is kind of suggested here. However, I can't say I was bothered. Heck, one of my all time favorite films is Braveheart, which has only a tangential and tenuous link to historical fact. This deserves no less a pass. You have to accept that these days you just couldn't sell to the audience or a studio a film where slavers were the good guys or girls in this case. Just do not attempt to pass this off as history. While more accurate than Black Panther, which had its own female warriors, I'd say it is on a par with your typical Joan of Arc biopic, of which I have rather a lot of recent experience. Purely as entertainment, though, it's decent enough, with Prince Bythewood possessing a good eye for spectacle. The various threads of Naniska's life are weaved together in a decent way, leading to a final confrontation that's no less satisfying for being entirely expected and reminiscent of another not very historical epic. Gladiator, however, at the macro level, it never quite meshed for me into more than a pleasant time passer. Naniska is a fascinating heroine in need of a character arc. The problem is, Navi is an interesting arc in desperate need of a character. Viola Davis carries a nation, and the movie in this appealing but flawed epic. Undoubtedly, The Woman King is a story about war. I'm just not sure it should be called a war movie. Or perhaps I'm reluctant to lump it in with that genre. The classification is almost exclusively the realm of a handful of American conflicts. In any case, while I'm not sure a picture as frequently brutal and tragic as The Woman King can be described as refreshing, it's nice to see a picture like this set in 19th century Africa. World War II has been pretty thoroughly covered at this point, after all. Generals and young soldiers in training, daring missions and improbable escapes, tragic losses, and climactic tt. Okay, it's a war movie. Perhaps more importantly, though, it's a Viola Davis movie, and she once again proves that she can carry pretty much any project. She plays General Naniska, the leader of the powerful Agojie military regiment in the Kingdom of Dahomey. While the story is a creation, most of the subject matter is true. Dahomey was located in present day Benin, where the film was partially shot for 4 centuries, and the Agojie were a rare all female group of warriors that protected the king. Naniska has the ear of King Gezo, John Boyega, at an inflection point for the kingdom. Nearby rivals are more powerful, and the European slave trade is slowly decimating the continent. Meanwhile, a young group of soldiers trains to join the Agojie, including Navi Thuso Mbedu, who has a surprising connection to one of her trainers, surprising if not original. The Woman King is a project badly handcuffed by its own script by Dana Stevens, which scours the recycling bin for every cliche it can reheat. Perhaps someone felt that the relatively novel setting of this film required a tired, familiar plot to get the audience on board. Whatever the motivation, the contrivances, and the exhausting 135-minute runtime make Woman King a bit of a slog. If we are exhausted, though, just imagine how Davis must feel. She needs to carry this thing on her shoulders for 2 hours. While she has help from director Gina Prince Bythewood and the cast, Mbedu is a breakout star, and both Lashana Lynch and Sheila Atem distinguish themselves. It's only thanks to her considerable efforts that The Woman King holds together. Her performance is passionate, raw, and inspiring. While she deserved a better script, it's to her credit that she elevated the one she had. Director Gina Prince Bythewood plants the bold flags of storytelling and myth making with this stirring period action movie inspired by the 19th century West African kingdom of Dahomey, now Benin, and its Agojie, an Amazon brigade of female warriors tougher and more feared than any men. Somewhere between a special forces unit and a Praetorian guard for the king. Viola Davis plays Naniska, the battle scarred general of the Agojie. Tough Developed as disciplined and hyper alert for any sign of attack from their old enemy, the Oyo Empire, and worried that the new king Gizo, John Boyega, who has deposed his brother in a coup, is not sufficiently focused return. Nanika's loyal lieutenants are Izogi, Lashana Lynch, and Amenza Sheila Atim, but she nonetheless finds herself strangely preoccupied by a new hothead recruit, Navi Thuso Mbedu, who has been effectively dumped on the military by an angry father on account of her resistance to marriage. As two Brazilian aristocrat slavers come to their country, eager to exploit the warring factions who each wish to sell off their prisoners of war into slavery, Navi is to come of age as a warrior and make a terrible discovery about her past. The Woman King is an interestingly old fashioned film with hints of Gladiator and Braveheart, although there is something bracingly contemporary in Prince Bythewood and her screenwriters Maria Bello and Dana Stevens tackling the way tribal warfare, insidiously encouraged by the imperialists, created the market forces for slavery, although Gazo is now considering making the big business model move from slavery to palm oil, which is lucrative and plentiful. This is a big bold picture with the vivid presences of Davis, Lynch, Atim, and Embedu giving it some real voltage. I sometimes wondered if there wasn't room for a more potent villain here, someone worthy to face off dramatically with the charismatic Davies. Boyega's Gezo is supposed to be flawed, but there was perhaps room for a real antagonist to strike more sparks. Even so, this is a grand spectacle with vivid and theatrical performances. The Woman King is released on the 4th of October in cinemas. When the concept for The Woman King was but a glimmer in Maria Bello's eye. Yes, that Maria Bello, the film is the longtime actress' first writing credit. Black Panther had not yet become a global smash. Gina Prince Bythewood had not yet shown her action movie chops with the Netflix hit The Old Guard, and Viola Davis had only been nominated for two Oscars. In short, it was a very different time. The journey from then, 2015, to now has only taken only 7 years, but Hollywood has changed immeasurably in the interim. And while celebrating the creation of something like Prince Bythewood's The Woman King, a crowd pleasing action epic that just so happens to center a group of African female warriors, is necessary. It also can't help but come with a button. In 2022, this should not be the exception. Hollywood should have been making films like The Woman King for many years. It should not have been a hard sell in 2015. It should not be a remarkable event in 2022. And yet, it is. The Woman King, while based on a lesser known segment of West African history during a decidedly fraught time in history, makes for a hell of a time at the movies, a seemingly niche topic with great appeal, the sort of battle heavy feature that will likely engender plenty of hoots and hollers. And if it seems a bit Hollywoodized, complete with glossy twists and a touch glossies and a touch of the soap opera to boot, perhaps that's part of what makes it so special. You've never seen a movie about this that looks, well, so funnily familiar. If that's what it took to get made, so be it. In this climate, in this world, stories like this are too precious and special to stay hidden. Bring them into the light. Kicking off in 1823 and with a Star Wars esque crawl to set the scene, see Hollywood epic for everyone. The Prince Bythewood, the Woman King, instantly brings us into the world of the vibrant and thriving Kingdom of Dahomey, the only place on the African continent that employs a full coterie of female warriors, the Agojie. But Dahomey is under constant threat with enemies both domestic, including a variety of other local tribes, and foreign, white men and their insidious slave trade. Its young king, Gizo John Boyega, is still unsure of how to rule. The large assortment of lieutenants and capos and even wives who he likes to gather on a regular basis don't speak so much to a love of different opinions. but a worry over forming his own. But his most skilled general Naniska Davis has plenty of ideas about what's right for her troops, for Dahomey. Naniska is a fierce warrior and an impressive leader, but she's grown tired of violence, or at least of the things that make it feel necessary, like slavery. Davis is, of course, perfect casting for a role that requires both gravitas and deep empathy. More than anything, she wants King Jezo to see the possibility of a Dahomey that does not need to engage in the slave trade. Yes, they sell to the white man. No, the woman king does not turn away from this part of history to be prosperous, that it does not need to sell any black body to get ahead. But Naniska's high ideals are coming to the fore at a terrible time. The other tribes are moving in close. The Agojie are training a fresh batch of newbies, including the young brawler Navi, played by the wonderful Thuso Mbedu. War is on the horizon. Slavery is inching closer. What can the Agojie do? Turns out just about everything, thanks to meticulous training, much of it led by Lashana Lynch as the wonderful Izogi, a strong sense of self, and a little bit of ingenuity. Revived the script, it was rewritten. No wonder the Agojai are treated with a profound reverence that also serves to keep them sequestered from the very people they are protecting. Commoners can't even look at them when they return from battle. Devalpas, they live in a special area of the palace where no one else can tread. But Prince Bythewood and her caste strive to make these women feel like fully realized people, not simply super soldiers with a panache for machete wielding. Ditto for the Kingdom of Dahomey, shot on location in Africa, which benefit immensely from rich production design from Akin Mackenzie. Delightful costumes from Gersha Phillips and functional and fun hairstyles from Louisa V. Anthony's department. Which is why the choice to not include more backstory as to how and why the Agogia became such a part of the very fabric of royal Dahomey life grates in an otherwise rich tale. Dana Stevens' script, she and Bello are both credited with the film's story, turns away from historical deep dives into both a soap opera level contrivance that links Naniska and Endawai beyond their warrior family, and a flat attempt at a love story that feels like the product of truly misguided studio notes. What if this film about chaste virgin female warriors included a heterosexual romance, and then also the Fabio-esque male love interest used it as an opportunity to learn about the horrors of slavery? But if these details are what it takes to bring this film to the big screen from a major studio and with a full theatrical rollout to boot, perhaps it was worth it. The Hollywood treatment should extend to any stories with this much inherent value and appeal. And still, the film is bursting with remarkable elements: a vivid and fully realized setting, eye popping battle sequences, pushing that PG 13 rating to wild ends, richly drawn characters, and wonderful performances from everyone. Good luck picking a standout performance, because while both Davis and Bedu are the obvious draws, Lynch and Sheila Atim also turn in star making supporting work, while Boyega makes off with a complicated portrayal of the young king, and Jamie Lawson steals the show every time she appears on screen as one of Gazzo's more ambitious wives. If this is what a Hollywoodized and sized blockbuster looks like in 2022, bring it on. Bring them all on. They are worth the fight. Boosted by strong test scores and an A plus cinema score, the Viola's Davis led will take the top spot at the box offices in its opening weekend. The Whooper Newton King, directed by Gina Prince Bythewood, earned $6.8 million on Friday, including $1. 7 million in preview day screenings on its way to an opening weekend box office total of $18 million. On the review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes, The Woman King boasts a 94% positive certified fresh score. The critical consensus reads, All hail Viola Davis, The Woman King rules. The film also stars the Sombedu, Lashana Lynch, Sheila Atim, and John Boyega, videos by Comic Book. Come the Woman King takes place in the African kingdom of Dahomey in the 1820s. Davis plays Jen, Naniska, the leader of an all female group of warriors who defend the kingdom. As a new threat approaches, she must train the next generation of Dahomey's defenders. I've never had a role like this before. It's transformative. Davis told Vanity Fair of playing Naniska in The Woman King and to be a producer on it and to know that I had a hand in bringing it to fruition. I knew what it would mean to us as Black people, something that has never been done before, and what it would mean for Black women sitting in that movie theater. The responsibility is really high. There are plenty of newcomers at the box office this weekend, hot out of the Toronto International Film Festival. The horror movie Barbarian, which opened in the top spot last weekend, clings to second place. A24's latest film, Pearl, lands in third place in its opening weekend. See How They Run opens in fourth place. Bullet Train rounds out the top five. The David Bowie documentary Moon Age Daydream lands in 10th place in its first weekend. The complete list of the top 10 films at the box office follows one. The Woman King in the 1800s, a group of all female warriors protect the African kingdom of Dahomey with skills and fierceness unlike anything the world has ever seen. Faced with a Nitu threat, Naniska trains the next generation of recruits to fight against a foreign enemy that's determined to destroy their way of life. Gina Prince Bythewood directed The Woman King from a screenplay by Dana Stevens based on a story she wrote with Maria Bello. The film stars Viola Davis, Thuso Mbedu, Lashana Lynch, Sheila Atim, and John Boyega. 2. Barbarian Week to Weekend, $6.5 million total, $21.1 million. A young woman discovers the rental home she booked is already occupied by a stranger. Against her better judgment, she decides it was spend the night, but soon discovers there's a lot more to fear than just an unexpected house guest. Zach Kreger wrote and directed Barbarian. It stars Georgina Campbell, Bill Skarsgård, and Justin Long. Point 3. Pearl, trapped on her family's isolated farm, Pearl must tend to her ailing father under the bitter and overbearing watch of her devout mother. Hoping for a more glamorous life, Pearl's ambitions, temptations, and repressions all collide to horrific effect. T. West directed Pearl, which is a prequel to his previous film, secretly shooting the films back to back. West also co-wrote the screenplay with star Mia Goth, who reprises her role as the title character that she originated in X. David Corenswet, Tandy Wright, Matthew Sunderland, and Emma Jenkins Puro also star. 4. See How They Run opening weekend total $2.7 million. In 1950s London, plans for a movie version of a smash hit play come to an abrupt halt after a pivotal member of the crew is murdered. When a world weary inspector and an eager rookie constable take on the case, they find themselves thrown into a puzzling voodoo net within the glamorously sordid world of underground theater, investigating the mysterious homicide at their own peril. Tom George directed See How They Run from a screenplay written by Mark Chappell. The film stars Sam Rockwell, Saoirse Ronan, Adrian Brody, Ruth Wilson, Reese Shearsmith, Harris Dickinson, and David Oyelowo 5. Bullet Train Week 7 weekend, $2.63 million total, $96. 5 million Ladybug is an unlucky assassin who's determined to do his job peacefully after one too many gigs has gone off the rails. Fate, however, may have other plans as his latest mission puts him on a collision course with lethal adversaries from around the globe, all with connected yet conflicting objectives on the world's fastest train. David Leitch directed Bullet Train from a screenplay by Zach Okovich, based on the novel by Kotaro Isaka. The movie stars Brad Pitt, Joey King, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Brian Tyree Henry, Andrew Koji, Gitchi Sassenditos Viti Sizadas, Fisire das Vidas 2000 in Vata Sis, Firute in Jirin dollars the Sender Sistuto. $709 million after more than 30 years of service as one of the Navy's top aviators, Pete Maverick Mitchell is where he belongs. Later, it was rewritten, pushing the envelope as a courageous test pilot and dodging the advancement in rank that would ground him. Training a detachment of graduates for a special assignment, Maverick must confront the ghosts of his past and his deepest fears, culminating in a mission that demands the ultimate sacrifice from those who choose to fly it. Joseph Kosinski directs Top Gun. Maverick, from a screenplay written by Aaron Kruger, Eric Warren Singer, and Christopher McQuarrie. The film stars Miles Teller, Jennifer Connelly, John Hamm, Glenn Powell, Louis Pullman, Ed Harris, and Val Kilmer. 7. DC League of Super Pets Week 8 weekend. $2.26 million total. $87.9 million crypto. The Super Dog and Superman are inseparable best friends, sharing the same superpowers and fighting crime side by side in Metropolis. However, when the Man of Steel and the rest of the Justice League are kidnapped, Crypto must convince a ragtag group of animals to master their own newfound powers for a rescue mission. J. Stern directed DC League of Super Pets and co-wrote the story with John Whittington. The movie's voices cast includes Dwayne Johnson, Kevin Hart, Kate McKinnon, John Krasinski, Vanessa Bayer, Natasha Lyonne, Diego Luna, Thomas Middleditch, Ben Schwartz, and Keanu Reeves. Point 8. The invitation, it was to weekend. $1.75 million total, $21.5 million after the death of her mother and having no other known relatives. Evie takes it a DNA test and discovers a limb lost cousin she never knew she had. Invited by her newfound family to a lavish wedding in the English countryside, Evie is at first seduced by the sexy aristocratic host. However, she soon thrust into a rat queen rewritten. She soon thrust into a nightmare's twisted secrets about her family history and the unsettling intentions behind their sinful generosity. Jessica M. Thompson directed The Invitation. 2000, the writer V was Piti Dalvirin 60 Baratitat Fetos was in Josephine Vanni Jean 16. Pulse one varasi pulse nalfin varited is the year val the fin dollars. Nizated the 1970s. Young Gru tries to join a group of supervillains called the Vicious Six after they oust their leader, the legendary fighter Wild Knuckles. When the interview turns disastrous, Gru and his minion go on the run with the vicious six hot on their tails. Luckily, he finds an unlikely source for guidance, Wild Knuckles himself, and soon discovers that even bad guys need a little help from their friends. Kyle Balda directed Minions, The Rise of Gru. The film's voice cast includes Steve Carell, Pierre Coffin, Taraji P. Henson, Michelle Yeoh, Arza, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Lucy Lawless, Dolph Lundgren, Danny Trejo, Russell Brand, Julie Andrews, and Alan Arkin. 10. Moonage Daydream featuring never before seen footage and performances. Filmmaker Brett Morgan explores David Bowie's creative, spiritual, and musical journey. Brett Morgan wrote, directed, and produced Moonage Daydream. It is his first film officially authorized by Bowie's estate, taking its title from one of Bowie's songs.